2015 Grand Prix winner, Busan International Choral Festival and Competition in Busan, South Korea, will lead us in the singing of the Philippine National Anthem, and after that they will also render a song entitled We Are the World.
Mayang magiliw, pela sa silamanan, alam ng puso, sa libig mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyat ka lang magiting, sa manlulupig, di ka pasisigil. Sa nagagkat punog sa simula, sa langit mong maghaw, may nilagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang isang ng matawat mo'y tagumpay na nagdidinig, ang ituwing na tarang niya kailan pa may di magdidinig. Lupa ng araw ng walhating pagsinta, uwi langit sa piling mo. Ang iligaya na may mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Thank you to the Los Cantantes de Manila. Secretary, please call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, De Lima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Honasan, Hontiveros, Lacson, Ligarda, Pacquiao, Pangilinan Po, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Soveri, Senate President Pimentel.
With 19 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader,
Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 30th session, Wednesday, November 9, 2016, and consider the same as approved.
is there any objection to the motion of the Majority Leader? There being none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, we'd like to mention the guests in the gallery visiting the Senate today. We have the faculty and staff of Mary Sunshine Montessori School of Kawayan City, Isabela, and the Polytechnic University of the Philippines students, CPAG, and guests of Senator Tiveros, cooperative leaders from various cooperatives from Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, together with the Cooperative Development Authority, led by Administrator Benji Olivia. Would like to welcome them, Mr. President.
Welcome to the Philippine Senate to all of our guests.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved. Yes, Mr. Secretary, please go ahead with the reference of business.
Bills on first reading, 1, 2, 3, 4, an act for the stewardship and conservation of built cultural heritage and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Paulo Benigno Bam Aquino IV.
Referred to the Committees on Education, Arts and Culture, Local Government, and Ways and Means.
1, 2, 3, 5, an act prohibiting a no permit, no exam policy on any such policy that prevents students of any educational institution from taking their examinations due to unpaid tuition and other school fees. Senator Bam Aquino IV.
To the Committee on Education, Arts and Culture.
Resolutions. 230, directing the Senate Committees on Environment and Natural Resources, on Agriculture and Food, on Health and Demography, and on Trade and Commerce to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the failure of the Bureau of Customs to dispose of the almost 4 million kilos of frozen meat that threatens the food safety and security, health and sanitation of the general public, and strengthening the conservation and protection of the environment with the end in view of proposing appropriate remedial interventions and legislation. Introduced by Senator Cynthia Villar.
To the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources.
231, directing the Senate Committee on Agriculture and Food to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the failure of the Bureau of Customs to come up with the implementing rules and regulations of Republic Act number 10845, or the Act declaring large-scale agricultural smuggling as economic sabotage that threatens the viability of the local farmers, particularly rice and sugar producers, and diminishes government revenue collection efforts. Senator Cynthia Villar.
To the Committee on Agriculture and Food.
232, directing the appropriate Senate Committee to review the implementation of Republic Act 10817 or the Philippine Halal Export Development and Promotion Act of 2016 with an end in view of ensuring that the religious significance of halal is not disregarded in making halal exports more competitive. Senator Sani Angara.
To the Committees on Agriculture and Food and Trade, Commerce and Entrepreneurship.
233, directing the Senate Committee on Agriculture and Food to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the reported improper utilization of COCO Levy funds. Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committee on Agriculture and Food.
Committee report. Committee report number 9 submitted by the Committee on Finance on House Bill number 3408, introduced by Representative Nograles et al., entitled An Act Appropriating Funds for the Operation of the Government of the Republic of the Philippines from January 1 to December 31, 2017, and for other purposes, recommending its approval with amendments. Sponsors: Senators Ligarda, Angara, Aquino IV, Lacson, and Villar.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Communication. Letter of Assistant Ombudsman Jennifer Hardin Manalili, addressed to the Senate President Aquilino Coco Pimentel III, which pertains to the Office of the Ombudsman decision in OMBCA 150298, case entitled Field Investigation Office versus Emmanuel Joel J. Villanueva et al., which was approved on October 11, 2016.
Mr. President,
Referred to the Committee on
Mr.
Rules.
President.
Majority Leader?
before that action
Okay.
of referring it to the Committee on Rules, may I be allowed a parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, sir.
You see, Mr. President, when this issue was called to my attention yesterday, as a matter of fact, I understand that my office was, they sent a copy to my office, and I was reminded by the poem of a prominent Protestant pastor. I'm sure you're very well aware of this. Let me just repeat it for the record. From Martin Nimolier. He said, first they came for the socialists. I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. I'm reminded, Mr. President, because I saw that in the journal, we have a letter from the Ombudsman dismissing Senator Joel Villanueva from being a senator. If that's how I read the letter. Now, my attention was called by Section 21 of the Republic Act 6770, which is the act that created, created the Office of the Ombudsman. So this is where their power comes from. So my question, my parliamentary inquiry is, how do we interpret Section 21 of the law that the Congress passed, which created the Ombudsman? Section 21 reads, officials subject to disciplinary authority, exceptions. The Office of the Ombudsman shall have disciplinary authority over all elective and appointed officials of the government and its subdivisions, instrumentalities, and agencies, including members of the cabinet, local government, government-owned or controlled corporations, and their subsidiaries, except over officials who may be removed only by impeachment, or over members of Congress and the judiciary. Paano ito, Mr. President? That is my parliamentary inquiry. How do I interpret it now? Interpret now Section 21 and the communication that you're about to refer to my committee. That is my problem, Mr. President. May I be favored with an
Senator
answer?
Drilon wants to be recognized, and he is recognized.
Mr. President, with the permission of the Majority Leader, I agree with the Majority Leader, Mr. President, that indeed under Section 21 of the Ombudsman's Act, under Section 21 of the Ombudsman's Act, The Office of the Ombudsman has disciplinary authority over all elective and appointed public officials, except over officials who may be removed only by impeachment or over members of Congress. This is consistent with Article 6, Section 16, Paragraph 3 of the Constitution, which empowers the respective chambers to discipline its members and the power to expel a member. Apparently, what happened, Mr. President, is that the case against our colleague, Senator Villanueva, was investigated, and the Field Investigation Office filed a case against Senator Joel Villanueva, while our colleague was a Director General of TESDA. And therefore, the Ombudsman took jurisdiction over the person of Senator Villanueva while he was an appointed official of TESDA over an act which was allegedly committed while he was a member of Congress. That is the situation. Now, so that when the Ombudsman rendered a decision, the administrative decision, finding Senator Villanueva to have committed allegedly these acts complained of in an administrative case, and therefore issued an order of dismissal. But the problem is the Ombudsman included the accessory penalty of perpetual disqualification from holding public office. And that is now the basis, according to the Ombudsman, of the of the order which the Majority Leader received, asking the Senate President to dismiss Senator Villanueva on the ground that he is now disqualified from holding the position of the senator. We believe, Mr. President, that this is a case of first impression. We have gone over quickly the established jurisprudence. We could not find a case which squarely would touch on the same on this issue. The authority of the Ombudsman, I mean, the lack of authority of the Ombudsman over members of Congress is recognized by jurisprudence, including the case of Office of the Ombudsman versus Rodriguez, decided in 2010. But in this particular case, the case was decided while the Senator Villanueva was, or the case was filed while Senator Villanueva was the Director General of TESDA. So I would strongly suggest that the matter be brought to the courts immediately, because this is a matter which would have to be decided by the courts. There is, in my mind, a very strong argument on the point of this House having authority to discipline its members. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, we might as well place on record also, or highlight the fact that the supposed action of Senator Villanueva was done when he was congressman. All right. Now, anyway, I think that will be a very good test for the courts to decide on. Now, with that, my next question then is, what do we do before your? That's why I stood up before you referred it to my committee, Mr. President. Because what do we do with resolution number 82 of the Philippine Senate? Resolution number 82 of the Philippine Senate, signed by President of the Senate, then Ernesto Maceda. Title: Resolution expressing the sentiment of the Senate that when any judicial order of preventive suspension is served upon the Senate President, such order shall be sent to the archives to be retrieved upon such time as may be determined appropriate by the Senate. The resolution is self-explanatory, but more or less that is the gist. Well, anyway, I leave it to the Senate President to decide.
The chair would refrain from answering the parliamentary inquiry and just ask the body if there is any objection to the referral of the letter, the said letter, to the Committee on Rules. Because if there is no objection, then that should stand. Is there any objection? No, there being none, so let the letter be referred to the Committee on Rules. And all of this discussion will be brought out in the Committee on Rules. But I have studied the case, and I will give advice to Senator Villanueva in private.
And I will make sure that I will invite you in the hearing of
Yes,
the
sir.
Committee on Rules to tackle this issue, Mr. President. I will immediately call a meeting of the Committee on Rules, and I will make sure that the legal secretariat of the Senate are all present, or members are all present.
A Majority Leader, Senator Subiri, wants to be recognized. So, Senator Subiri, you're
Yes, with
recognized.
permission of the Majority Floor Leader, I just was wondering why they took full cognizance of, or the ombudsman put all the focus on our colleague, Senator Joel Villanueva, when there are several pending cases. This is the first case that she actually dismissed his position and considered him removed from office. What about the others pending in the House of Representatives? Even in this August chamber. So, kawawa naman, no? Naawa na ako sa aking kaibigan na all the focus is pinned on him when this is basically preliminary investigation. I don't even think that there was still a filing with the Sandigan Bayan, as far as I know, Mr. President. I'm just putting that on record, Mr. President. I
This
think it's
is
unfair to our colleagues.
This is an administrative case, actually, not a criminal case.
With that, Mr.
Majority
President,
Leader.
and the permission of the body, I move to transfer from the calendar for ordinary business to the calendar for special orders. House Bill 3408 under Committee Report Number 9.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, House Bill number 3408 under Committee Report number 9 is transferred to the calendar for ordinary business.
With the permission of the Chamber, I move to consider House Bill 3408 under Committee Report 9.
Any objection? Hearing none, House Bill number 3408 under Committee Report number 9 is under consideration.
May we ask Secretary to read the title of the measure?
Secretary, please do so.
An act appropriating funds for the operation of the government of the Republic of the Philippines from January 1 to December 31, 2017 and for other purposes.
Mr. President, to sponsor the measure, may we ask the Chairman of the Committee on Finance, Senator Loren Legarda, be recognized, after which Senator Cynthia Villar, Senator Sani Angara, Senator Bam Aquino, and Senator Ping Lacson, the Finance Subcommittee chairs, will deliver their co-sponsorship speeches. Senator Loren Legarda, Mr. President.
The chairman of Committee on Finance is hereby recognized, Senator Loren Legarda.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, we live in extraordinary times and we are going through an extraordinary time of change. It is therefore my honor to present to you our proposed 2017 budget that sets bold plans to meet not just today's needs, but one that looks beyond 2017, one that contributes to delivering long-term solutions to the country's long-term problems. The 3.350 trillion proposed national budget for 2017 is the biggest annual budget ever assembled, a budget that will help deliver the change that our people want and need. The budget before you is not a mere compilation of cold and impersonal words and numbers. It is the lifeblood of our nation, crafted to fuel hope and inspire our people to believe in our collective future again. One has to read between the lines of these hefty books, for behind the hard numbers lie stories of real people whose pleas were met with either apathy, neglect, or by the arrogance of power. Tucked within the thick pages of this book is the memory of young Cristel Tejada 3 years ago, who killed herself unable to raise the 10,000 pesos tuition fee she needed to continue her college education. Our countrymen still affected by the wrath of Typhoon Yolanda 3 years ago and in dire need of assistance until now. Or the farmer mercilessly shot to death because he was asking to be given rice at a protest rally in the drought-stricken, unirrigated farms of Kidapawan, North Cotabato. They are the faces of the more than 22 million Filipinos who are poor, half of them living in extreme poverty and lacking the means to feed themselves. Mr. President, it can no longer be budget as usual. We need to have a budget that works, one that places money where they will make a real difference in improving the lives of our people. We need to have an inclusive budget, one that will consider the needs of every Filipino without prejudice to age, gender, sexual orientation, and gender identity, ethnicity, faith, and religion, and physical limitations. We need to be ambitious for our people. But how can we put life into this ambition if the resources to deliver programs are not spent? I am outraged by the fact that while our people are pleading for as little as a few hundreds of pesos to buy food, or a few thousands to continue education, billions of funds intended for programs have remained untouched. As of June 30, 2016, our government is saddled with total unobligated allotments amounting to 156.98 billion pesos. Agencies simply were not able to spend these funds released in 2015. The logic escapes me. While agencies by law have only until December of this year to spend these funds, it is unwise to indulge in wasteful year-end spending because this can only result to sacrifices in spending quality. Mr. President, our budget is our investment for the future. It is supposed to construct new mass transport systems, new airports, road systems, and schools. They are supposed to fund services for the sick and the poor and the vulnerable, provide electricity to our people, build irrigation for our farmers. The unspent amount could have built 678,662 decent homes for the poor, 29,276 kilometers of farm-to-market roads, 215,000 classrooms with toilet and furniture, or it could have put more than 3 million Cristels through university. Underspending simply means missed opportunities. It means denying our people the services they deserve. We would not want to engage ourselves, however, in a blame game here. What we wish to encourage is that we all work together and provide the people what is due them. We are therefore proposing a budget that provides a disincentive to hoard funds by limiting executive discretion to impound funds in accord with the decision of the Supreme Court. This budget will also clearly define the conditions under which savings may be declared compliant with the decision of the Supreme Court. Starting next year, savings can only be declared under the following conditions. First, final discontinuance or abandonment of an ongoing program, activity, or project by the head of agency concerned due to causes not attributable to the fault or negligence of the said agency, which would not render it possible for the agency to implement said PAP during the validity of appropriations. Second, non-commencement of the PAP for which the appropriations is released. Non-commencement shall mean the inability of the agency or its duly authorized procurement agent to obligate the released allotment and to implement the PAP due to natural or man-made calamities or other causes not attributable to the fault or negligence of the agency. Third, decreased cost resulting from improved efficiency during the implementation or until the completion of the PAPs. Fourth, the difference between the approved budget for the contract and the contract price, including any variation required for its project. Programmed appropriations which have not been released or allotments not yet obligated shall not be considered savings. Mr. President, the national budget is anchored on a sound reading of the domestic and international economic outlook. We are forecasting real gross domestic product or GDP to grow at 6.5 to 7.5% over the coming year, with inflation rate settling at the level of 2 to 4%. The 364-day Treasury bill rate is projected to hover between 2.5 to 4%, while the peso-dollar exchange rate is seen to eventually settle to between 45 to 48 pesos to the dollar. Our gross international reserves are projected at 86.3 billion US dollars, equivalent to 8.9 months of our country's imports of goods, services, and income. These assumptions are based on government's forecast of strong domestic demand and investment, which will continue to boost our economic growth. Some uninitiated fear that the exchange rate assumption may no longer be relevant since the peso-dollar rate is now approaching 49 to the dollar. Such fear is unfounded. On the contrary, a peso depreciation favors the government's fiscal position. Specifically, for every peso depreciation, expected revenues increase by 9.2 billion due to imports and custom duties. While this will also translate to an increase in government's disbursements by 2 billion to pay for foreign-denominated debts, the net effect then is still a positive 7.2 billion pesos. Mr. President, our budget seeks to deliver results. This will require an expanded spending program in 2017 that will result in a slight increase in our deficit from 2.7% of GDP this year to 3% in 2017. This, according to our budget experts, is still manageable and necessary to sustain the country's growth momentum. By the end of the year, the government's debt is expected to decline to 42.7% of GDP from 44.7% in 2015 and 52.4% in 2010. Our economic projections suggest that this trajectory will continue to contract to 35% in 2022. A proactive debt management will be exercised to strike a balance between easing the debt burden on expenditures and a more strategic borrowing, guided by the objective of improving and expanding the delivery of services and benefits that will be felt by all Filipinos. Mr. President, the highest poverty incidence in the country is in Mindanao, and this budget takes the conscious effort to address that. Mindanao has the highest budget growth among the island groupings, with its per capita allocation for 2017 outpacing that of Luzon and the Visayas. As a people's budget for real change, 1.345 trillion or 40% of the entire budget is being proposed to deliver social services that will address the most basic needs of our people. 151.5 billion pesos is being proposed to fund health services, including the hiring of doctors, midwives, nurses, to service the needs of our poorest communities in the country, to build more hospitals, to procure medicines. Rehabilitation centers for drug dependents will be built as part of the government efforts to find a lasting solution to our war on illegal drugs. This government is delivering initiatives to improve education. Funding is set at the level of 699.95 billion pesos to finance the construction of classrooms, hire teachers, and procure instructional materials. 78.7 billion pesos is set to support a comprehensive social investment package in the form of the Conditional Cash Transfer Program, targeting 4.4 million eligible beneficiaries by next year. Inclusive growth means sharing growth with everyone. Thus, the 2017 budget provides social pension to all indigent senior citizens aged 60 and above. Mr. President, we have a proud history of hardworking people. We should make it easier for them to contribute to our nation's growth story. As such, a leap in infrastructure spending is one of the priorities of the 2017 budget, given its indispensable role in poverty reduction, in raising productivity, in spreading the benefits of economic growth. By providing 860.7 billion pesos for infrastructure development, equivalent to 5.4% of GDP, we are taking a huge step towards ending our people's daily commute of 3 to 5 hours to and from their places of work and schools. We are hopefully strengthening the foundations of education and health, facilitating commerce, promoting mobility, revitalizing industries, strengthening services. The government is committed to delivering better economic services. Thus, 27.6% of the budget, or 924 billion pesos, is allocated for this purpose. Our farmers and our fisher folks, many of whom rely on subsistence agriculture, will be better served through credit support and insurance, financial and technological resources, irrigation, and infrastructure support. This budget will endeavor to provide food for our producers in the rural areas, a sector most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. Energy poverty will be addressed. For this, 1.82 billion will be allotted for the Sitio Electrification Program of the National Electrification Administration, or NEA, covering 2,410 sitios in remote areas. 820 million pesos will be allotted to the Department of Energy for the nationwide intensification of household electrification, and 190 million pesos for the household electrification program in off-grid areas. Regional economic development will be supported through initiatives that will unlock the potential of our MSMEs, boost agriculture, strengthen our competitiveness, promote tourism, as well as to build resilience in our communities. A fundamental responsibility of government is to protect its people, to enable our government to succeed in its war on drugs and criminality. We need to provide it with the wherewithal to bring this campaign to its rightful conclusion. As such, we are proposing 206.6 billion budget for public order and safety, up 19% from 173.2 billion this year. This includes the 500 million pesos for the DILG's Masa Masid, or mamamayang ayaw sa anomalya, mamamayang ayaw sa illegal na droga, a community-based program to engage volunteers in the fight against criminality, corruption, and illegal drugs. As part of our campaign to build a minimum credible defense capability, 147.8 billion pesos will be allocated for this purpose, increasing the allocation by 13% from the 2016 2016 budget. Mr. President, after 2 months of marathon hearings and technical working groups, your Committee on Finance hereby puts forward a proposed budget of 2,497,086,952,000 pesos, broken down as follows, with program appropriations of 2,431,986,952,000 pesos and unprogrammed appropriations of 65,100 million. This budget seeks to provide more to those in greater need. Towards this end, we submit the following amendments. First, this budget will make it possible for the invisible, informal sector to now have access to the government's universal health care program. According to the Department of Health, some 8% of Filipinos are still not covered by PhilHealth. Hence, we have provided a 3 billion peso increase in the PhilHealth budget so that all Filipinos will now be covered by the program, while indigent patients will not have to pay for anything in state-owned hospitals under the no balance billing policy. Your committee, Mr. President, tried to go even one step further by also providing preventive healthcare services for all government employees in the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. Unfortunately, PhilHealth is not ready at this time to take on this task. We will persist in this proposal for inclusion in the 2018 National Expenditure Program. Second, we have included a 2 billion peso irrigation fee subsidy in the budget of the National Irrigation Administration so that irrigation service fees will no longer be collected by NIA from farmers' associations. Our farmers who feed the nation are among the poorest of the poor, who urgently need government support and intervention. An accompanying special provision for this purpose specifies that this 2 billion peso allocation shall be used to cover the operating requirements of NIA and the maintenance of existing irrigation facilities which were previously funded out of the collections from the irrigation service fees. Third, all progressive nations have put science, technology, innovation as a centerpiece of their development policy. In our case, around 41% were enrolled in science, technology, education, agri-fisheries, and mathematics, or STEAM, in school year 2014 to 2015. To further encourage enrollment in STEAM programs, we are supporting the grant of scholarships to students enrolled in priority courses in all state universities and colleges. CHED's special provision, prioritizing the provision of state funds to scholars taking up STEAM courses in other key growth areas such as electronics, business process outsourcing, tourism, general infrastructure, and other priority manufacturing industries, will be vital in our effort to build a knowledge-based and innovation economy. Fourth, the justice sector is faced with an ever-increasing prison population. And with this reality comes the continued deterioration of conditions in our prisons, including the inability to provide decent meals to our prisoners. We need to support a humane correctional system that will promote the reformation of offenders. As such, we have provided 388 million for the Bureau of Jail Management and Penology, 163 million for the Bureau of Corrections to increase our prisoners' daily subsistence allowance. Fifth, in honor of our centenarians, we've allocated 100 million pesos for their one-time cash grant. Our budget adheres to the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, of ending poverty and hunger, improving health and education, making cities more sustainable, combating the adverse effects of climate change, promoting peace and justice for all, protecting the environment and biodiversity. We are on track to meeting the first of the 7 global targets of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, which is to reduce disaster mortality. This budget will make sure we remain on course. And because culture is a story as a nation, we shall endeavor to provide the funds needed for the integration and mainstreaming of arts and culture in the country's educational system, as well as support the National Commission on Culture and Arts. I further submit, Mr. President, the following special and general provisions for the 2017 budget. First, in building resilience in agricultural communities, the Department of Agriculture will undertake disaster-resilient agricultural infrastructure projects and practices. The Department of Agrarian Reform will promote the adoption of sustainable farming approaches. Second, we have introduced special provisions that require the integration of educational modules on indigenous knowledge, heritage, biodiversity, environmental protection, disaster risk reduction, and climate change in the K-12 curriculum, as well as in the curriculum of state universities and colleges. Third, a special provision under DNR identifies critical watershed areas, other protected areas, and communities ravaged by extreme weather events as areas to be prioritized as planting sites under the National Greening Program. It in fact even prescribes the inclusion of bamboo, coconut palm, and other indigenous species as planting materials for the program. Fourth, special provision task the DILG to ensure that evacuation centers are able to withstand 300 kilometers per hour winds and 8 magnitude earthquake with natural ventilation and rainwater catchment facilities, as well as special facilities for the elderly, persons with disabilities, women, and children. To ensure rice subsidies in the form of cash allowance equivalent to 20 kilos of rice to be given to firefighters, jail guards, and police. Other personnel to be given rice subsidies are the military and uniformed personnel of the Philippine Army, Philippine Air Force, Philippine Navy. Finally, the DSWD special provision on the Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino program specifies that the beneficiary shall be entitled to a rice allowance in the form of cash grants amounting to a total of 23.4 billion pesos. In addition, several general provisions are also proposed, requiring infrastructure projects to conform to resilience standards to withstand natural hazards, assigning priority to government structures located in areas highly vulnerable to seismic activity for repair and retrofitting, protecting built heritage, cultural properties, and cultural landscapes from alteration, renovation, or demolition by requiring prior approval by government cultural agencies, requiring the inclusion of the protection of biodiversity in the development programs and the projects of agencies, offices, and local governments, setting a 1-year availability timeframe of appropriations under 2017 GAA to instill a sense of urgency among government agencies in utilizing their budget to the last peso. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, once more, we are faced with the task of establishing our funding priorities on behalf of our people. I need not underscore the fact that Congress holds the power of the purse. It is an empty power, however, if the purse strings are drawn tight by the government's failure to spend all of its funds judiciously. The budget bill puts our people at the front and center of our agenda. It aims not just to create growth, but ensures that everyone benefits from the growth that we will all create together. I urge you, Mr. President, all our colleagues, to support this measure. Thank you.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, Senator Angara will just submit a co-sponsorship speech Likewise, Senator Mamakino will no longer come up with a cause-positive speech as much as the chairman has already covered most of what is going to be taken up.
The manifestation is noted.
Same with Senator Lacson, Mr. President. In that case, Mr. President,
How about Senator Villar?
Senator Villar will just submit for the record
Also.
her co-sponsorship speech. We will give the members of the Senate copies of the co-sponsorship speeches, Mr. President. Now, Mr. President, considering that the period of interpellations on the general principles and budget proposals of the various departments and agencies of the government are scheduled to start tomorrow morning, November 15, 2016, at 9 a.m., to continue until the afternoon of November 18, 2016. We'd just like to place that on record so that the senators would make sure that the schedules are available. In the meantime, I move to suspend consideration of House Bill 3408 under Committee Report Number 9.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
Thank you. Mr. President, may we have a 1-minute suspension?
Session is suspended.
Di ba budget hearing na yan, pabili ako ng marami. Garbage best. Pabili ako, lalagyan natin sa stock natin doon. Hindi tayo ng piso.
doon sa bata nila. Ayun, silang lahat. Ano kasi may basa. Yung masak lang ang bilis, hindi makabili sa kanila. Sabay sa FPU din. Oo. Ano yun sir eh? Kumbaga talaga. Siyempre, hindi ka naman pinaan sa atin kahit na kailang ko na nalaman sa ganun para sa inyo. Hindi na tayo masyadong na-aware sa lahat. Baka makita ko sa Google na sa mga isip mo lang naman na tayo na dapat ko sa atin. Dapat sa pala yung dapat channel ko, dapat na hindi pinapakita na sabi sigurita sa akin. Lagi ko nakikita ng GSI, GSI, may bakbakan na.
Saka survey.
Yung hati.
Joe. Mga rules ulit ng rules ng voting. Ito resolution. Gusto nila i-vote nila. Marcos Mariano. Bago kasi yung gathering doon. They will be pushing voting. They're being to carry the measure, the proposed measure.
Yes,
Session is resumed.
thank you. Mr. President, Senator Hontiveros talked to me the other day and again today, earlier, and also was being endorsed by Senator Rilon, that I call back Senate Resolution 86, PS, proposed Senate Resolution 86, which we will not able to take up the other time because the motion to take it up was lost. So at this point, Mr. President, to settle the issue once and for all, I move to consider PS Resolution 86.
There is a motion to consider proposed Senate Resolution number 86. Any objection? Hearing none, PS Resolution number 86 is under consideration.
Maybe ask Secretary to read the title of the measure.
A resolution expressing the sense of the Senate that the crimes of the former President Ferdinand Marcos to the Republic and the human rights violations committed under his regime render him unfit to be buried at the libingan ng mga bayani.
Majority Leader?
The measure was sponsored last time by Senator Hontiveros through her privilege speech. So at this point, I move that the privilege speech of Senator Hontiveros be considered into the resolution, Mr. President.
There is a motion to also consider the privileged speech delivered by Senator Hontiveros pertaining to PS Resolution number 86. Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Now, Mr. President, I am in a quandary, Mr. President, because I don't know if I can file the motion to adopt the resolution because I have this personal belief that I would rather stick and follow the sentiment of the Supreme Court. So I leave it to Senator Ontiveros to move for the adoption, or perhaps Senator Dillon.
Senator Drilon is recognized.
Mr. President, in that case, may we move that the body adopt proposed Senate Resolution number 86. So move, Mr. President.
There is a motion by Senator Drilon for the body to adopt proposed Senate Resolution number 86. Is there any objection? Hearing none, Senator Soto.
I cannot vote in favor, Mr. President. As I said, I will support the Supreme Court. I don't know if you will treat it as an objection, but
We will treat that as an objection.
thank you.
So there is an objection. Senator Gordon is raising his hand. Yes, sir.
Does this mean, Mr. President, that we are now being called to vote on the issue that has already been decided by the Supreme Court without debate?
Yes, sir.
Because I find it unconscionable for us to debate something that the Supreme Court has already debated on. And while I do not agree fully with the Marcoses, or I do agree in part to the proposition, I cannot in conscience vote wisely on this matter. As far as I'm concerned, we should put Mr. Marcos to sleep permanently. And we're not burying him as a hero. As far as I'm concerned, we're burying him as a former president. Of course, it is up to them. If there are people who feel that there is opprobrium in the fact that he is being buried in the libingan ng mga bayani or as a president, then it's up to them to say so. But I don't think we should force each and every senator here to vote on a matter that cannot be decided fully. In the first place, I'm not protecting anybody here, but here we have people here who will say that they are for due process of law, and yet when it comes to due process of law here, there is no decision made against President Marcos, insofar as I'm concerned, and yet we are casting judgment on our part here. We're casting judgment without any court of law in this country saying that he is guilty of all these crimes. Now, for all you know, many of us feel, as we feel in all administrations, that there have been corruption. We know that. But we are still a government of laws, and therefore, Mr. President, I feel that we should at least, because it has taken so long, Mr. President, the greatest travesty that has been committed here, and our silence is deafening, and I've stood up before here, not only in this Congress, but in the previous Congress, is that we have allowed the people who killed President Marcos to escape. We do not know who had him killed as of this time. I mean, Mr. Aquino, Mr. President, sorry. You see, I feel that there has got to be closure. This is the first issue that must be resolved. You have had President Cory Aquino become president. You have had President Noynoy Aquino become president. The people who escorted Mr. Marcos out of the airplane are still around. And yet, Mr. Aquino, and yet, I'm very bad at names. I'm sorry. I hope you'll pardon my placement of names at times. But they're still alive, Mr. President. To me, it is robbing the people of a sense of justice that the perpetration of such inaction or such inability to find whoever killed him makes us feel weak, make us feel inadequate, adds to the complacency, adds to the apathy of our people. And as far as I'm concerned, when we do this, what kind of position will I take now insofar as, let's say, this policeman who barged into the jail and started killing these people? I mean, you remember in the middle of the investigation, I raised the issue whether they are properly supported in every investigation here. I've always asked whether the people under investigation has counsel in accordance with the Constitution, Mr. President. And fortunately, Mr. Lacson had already taken care of that. And so that is all in pursuit of fairness, of equity, of making sure that the rights of everybody is done. Now, in this particular case, Mr. President, you know, as I said earlier before, last week, we were also part and parcel of the Marcos administration, although we never were able to get done. You know, my mother was arrested without any warrant, and she was taken to Campo Livas, and I had to fight it out with them, with General Tomas Diaz. Mr. President, during the time of the elections, we were abused. I mean, our people were hurt by other people identified with the candidate of Mr. Marcos at the time. I voted to ban Mr. Marcos when I was in the Constitutional Convention. I even wanted to ban those who accepted money from Mr. Marcos from voting out of delicadeza during that time, Mr. President. I don't have to have a brief here on whether I'm pro-Marcos or anti-Marcos, but in this light, Mr. President, I have to be consistent. I'm only speaking for myself. I have to be consistent as a matter of principle that we cannot just judge here, especially since the Supreme Court has already judged the Marcoses insofar as that is concerned, and I don't feel it is appropriate or proper for us in this Congress. Let the Justice Department, let the judiciary of this country handle that. Insofar as it is concerned, we are merely expressing our umbrage, or some of us are merely expressing their umbrage. Let it be off record then that the senators who feel umbraged by this decision state it on record. Let them deliver their presentation. But insofar as I'm concerned, I feel unqualified to make a judgment on a 9-4 decision of 9-5, ba? 9-5 decision, which is a major majority, Mr. President. I don't feel qualified. I don't have all the data. I don't have all the facts. And from what I've seen, people who are going after Marcos has fallen short. They've had to find justice in America. And to me, that is really a slap on the sovereignty of this country. Why can we never prosecute anybody in this country? And we have to resort to things like this, that we have to come out and express our umbrage. Parang we're barking like dogs upon a caravan that's passing by. And we never got justice, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, that is my feeling. I hope you will forgive me. My colleagues will forgive me. It comes from my heart. It comes from my mind, from my training as a lawyer. And therefore, Mr. President, I will have to say no to this resolution unless we can debate this further and find out what is going to happen here. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, may I now move on the previous question? There's a motion that
we're treating that as part of the debates, as part of the objections. Senator
Yes.
De Lima is raising her hand. Senator De Lima is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a brief retort to the manifestation of our dear colleague, Senator Gordon. As one of the petitioners in that case, I definitely feel an extreme dismay over the decision of the majority of the Supreme Court. And that's why, just like the other petitioners, I intend to file a motion for reconsideration within the proper period. Having said that, may I also take the position that notwithstanding the decision of the Supreme Court, this body, this institution, as an independent, co-equal, separate branch of government, can very well express its own stand or its own position on the matter. If ordinary citizens can take a stand on this matter of transcendental importance or grave national interest, with more reason that the Senate as an institution can express its own or can make a stand on the matter. We have done that in previous instances, in previous issues, like the issue on the need for the on the EDCA. The Supreme Court has a different decision, a different ruling, different from the sins of the Senate, which is the need for ratification of EDSA by the Senate. So I take that position that we can proceed to adopt this resolution. Thank you.
Senator Gordon is recognized.
If that is the case, Mr. President, then let us state here our positions individually without taking a vote. I don't mind that. At least there will be nobody sitting on the center line. If we do not agree with the Supreme Court, Mr. President, the lady from Bicol has already stated that she's going to file a motion for reconsideration. Equity or justice requires that the Supreme Court be given the chance to consider the motion for reconsideration, Mr. President. We should wait. Now, obviously, we don't want to wait, and obviously, there are people, I've heard the administration, and you know, I've had disagreements with this administration. I think my record speaks for itself here. And therefore, when this thing happens, when I hear the cabinet say, Secretary Lorenzana say, he has a 21-gun salute because he is President of the Republic. As far as I'm concerned, you can call him Pagulo or Pangulong Marcos. Put him to sleep, Mr. President. What I really disdain is up to now, Mr. Marcos still has a say on this country's politics. Let us learn from it. Let us avoid the mistakes of electing people who should not be elected or taking a position at the time when they're fooling around. But I saw that, Mr. President. I have been a witness to history, as have many of our colleagues here. When I was in the Constitutional Convention, anything can be rationalized. Even up to now, we are still in the process of rationalizing things, Mr. President. What is important, even in our political parties, is there still rationalization. We have to have a principled stand every time we conduct the matters of state, Mr. President. In this matter, Mr. President, I will have the Senate know that I have 2 members of my staff who are former members of the NPA, one of whose father was killed during the Marcos regime. And she has asked my permission to go out and argue the case in the Supreme Court. And I said, fine, you will hear no squawk from me. Go ahead and argue the case. And if you win, we will follow. But, Mr. President, she lost. She lost the Supreme Court. And if we do not follow the Supreme Court, isn't that a slippery slope? If we indicate that we can stand up against the Supreme Court, albeit here, not in the halls of the Supreme Court, here, Mr. President, that's a very dangerous situation. Look at what the President just stated a while ago, and I called the attention of my good friend Senator Dillon. The other day, I was umbraged at the fact that the President was threatening to declare martial law, and if the Supreme Court does not decides against him, he might do something that is independent of the Supreme Court. That is why we should be careful. We must use the rules of the country, the separation of powers in this country properly. Let's go to the Supreme Court. When the COMELEC did not use the law that we enacted here in this Congress, I had to go to the Supreme Court and argue my case, not just once but twice. In the last argument, we finally won, Mr. President. And so therefore, Mr. President, my plea is not for anybody. My plea is for the rule of law. My plea is to make sure that we send the right message. Like I say, the right message is for the people who are not in favor to speak up here and say, we're against it. And for those who are in favor, to say, let's put it to sleep or whatever they want to do. But to vote as a Senate sends a very bad signal that the Supreme Court seems to be a Marcos court. Mr. President, President Aquino has appointed many members of the Supreme Court, and so is Mr. Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo. We cannot categorize courts in this country. When I was in UP, that was the argument of the left. They will put you in a category. Tuta ka ni Marcos o bata ka ng Kano. That is wrong, Mr. President. The important thing is for us to argue our case in the proper forum. Let's argue each other. Don't call each other names. And that is why even in the United States today, their own democracy is being imperiled. There are people on the street saying, "Oh, I did not vote for Mr. Trump, and therefore I will not recognize him." It creates only what? Time that is challenging the whole system of our country. We must show that we can win. We can win. Put closure on the Aquino assassination, Mr. President. Put closure on many things. You know, when we appear to investigate the police in this country, Mr. President, we also put ourselves on the line. We want to make sure that these people go to jail. And I think Mr. Lacson and I have spoken, even before the termination, that we see a very violent, a very direct intention to kill these people, which does not behoove the whole police force, Mr. President. That is a time for us to make an argument. But when the Supreme Court has already decided, I would rather wait for the motion for reconsideration, and if the Supreme Court says that's it, then we follow. That's all my point, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Gordon. What's the pleasure? Okay. We are already beyond the question of whether we will consider PS Resolution number 86 or not. We are now actually considering PS Resolution number 86, and the Chair has restated the motion and there has been an objection. So we are now ready to divide the House on PS Resolution number 86. Okay, those who are in favor, the motion is to adopt proposed Senate Resolution number 86, the title of which has been read by the Secretary. Those in favor, we vote by raising of hands. Those in favor, please raise your hand. Including me. Including me. Those not in favor of proposed Senate Resolution number 86, please raise your hand. Okay, let me announce the result, please. Those who did not participate will be deemed as having abstained.
I will wait.
Can we announce the vote
Can
first?
I announce the vote
There was a
first?
raising of hands.
I will vote it.
So ano yung dyan? Dodi, ano? How many are present? Hindi. To adopt, you need the majority of those present. Can I get the results, please?
Okay. We need 10 to approve.
With 8 affirmative votes, 6 negative votes, 6 abstentions, the motion is lost.
Huh? What? What's the ruling of the chair, Mr. President?
Motion is lost. Because there are 20 senators present, so
May I read the rules so that it will not be questioned?
The majority, there being a quorum, Mr. President. That's the rule.
Majority of all the members. Majority of those present. Those present.
Majority Leader, ano tayo?
There is, Mr. President, there is, may I move to suspend, Mr. President?
Okay.
We will, motion is, session is suspended.
Yes, sir. Hindi, sir. Tayo na yes, abstain, 9. Yes na 0, 909.
Saan yung voting? Ano yung rule? Ito na, ito na.
Oh, ha? Hindi na rin. Oh, okay. Those who voted. Oh, okay. Nakita naman ng AJ.
Okay, session is resumed.
Sino-sino, alam nila eh.
Mr. Majority Leader?
Yeah, Mr. President, I was about to move for adjournment, but Senator Drilon wants to...
Senator Drilon is recognized.
May we know, Mr. President, if the Secretariat was able to record the senators who voted for, against, and abstained on the motion to adopt the proposed Senate resolution?
Can the Secretary answer the question? Do we know who voted yes in favor of PS Resolution 86, who voted against, and who abstained from voting? Yes, sir. Mr. Senator
May that be read into the record, Mr. President?
Is there any objection to the motion? There being none, the motion is granted and I will do it myself. Those who voted in favor of proposed Senate Resolution number 86 are the following senators: Aquino, De Lima, Drilon, Ontiveros, Pangilinan, Poe, Villanueva, Pimentel. Those who voted against proposed Senate Resolution number 86 are the following: Senators Gordon, Honasan, Lacson, Pacquiao, Soto, Villar. And those who were considered to have abstained are the following senators: Angara, Binay, Escudero, Gatchalian, Recto, Subiri, giving us the result 866. Is the good senator satisfied with the answer?
Mr. President,
May you recognize
Thank you, Senator Dillon.
Senator
Senator
Angara,
Angara is
then
recognized.
Senator Escudero, then Senator Recto, Mr. President.
may we explain our abstention, Mr. President? This is a very divisive and emotional issue as seen by the discussion the past few days leading up to the Supreme Court decision and the days afterwards. And I feel it is an issue uniquely suited to be decided not by the politicians, but by our people in a national referendum, Mr. President. That has been my position in my public life for the last 13 years through 3 presidents and 3 administrations. And I do believe in national healing, and I do believe that the Governor Imy's apology is a good first step. But I do feel that the wounds are still a bit raw. The history has not been fully written on these chapters of martial law, Mr. President. We owe it to our people to hear the stories of torture, of disappearances. I know I would feel bad if I had a relative who disappeared during martial law, Mr. President. But either way we decide on this issue, we will be criticized, insensitive, or not paying attention to history. That's why of the many issues that are important in our public life, Mr. President, I feel it is only through a national referendum that we can move on from this issue. The Libigan ng mga Bayani was established according to Republic Act 8289, originally called the Republic Memorial Cemetery. It states that the cemetery, originally for soldiers, is supposed to commemorate the presidents, national heroes, and patriots, quote-unquote, for the inspiration and emulation of this generation and generations still unborn. So definitely this is not an empty debate, Mr. President. I just feel the debate is not properly suited for this hall, Mr. President. It is a larger debate that we must throw out to our countrymen, like all political debates and like all true democracies, Mr. President, because there are so many questions to be answered. For example, why did we pass Republic Act 10368, the Human Rights Victims Reparation and Recognition Act of 2013, where we state in the Declaration of Policy, it is hereby declared the policy of the state to recognize the heroism and sacrifices of all Filipinos who were victims of summary execution, torture, enforced or involuntary disappearance, and other gross human rights violations committed during the regime of former President Marcos, covering the period from September 21, 1972 to February 25, 1986, and restore the victims' honor and dignity. The state hereby acknowledges its moral and legal obligation to recognize and or provide reparation to said victims and or their families for the deaths, injuries, sufferings, deprivations, and damages they suffered under the regime. Mr. President, that is part of our Republic Act that has been adopted by our public institutions. That's a decision we have already consciously made. So I feel really we can do it as soon as the next national election, which is the election for barangay and SK, which we postponed to October 2017. As early as that, it's just one line in the ballot. Do you support the burial of President Marcos in the Libingan ng mga Bayani? Yes or no? It's as simple as that, Mr. President. It will not cost the Republic a single
peso, except perhaps the reprinting costs, since some ballots have already been printed, Mr. President. But I do feel that it's not to say that President Marcos should never be buried there. Perhaps there will come a day when history will judge him differently. But perhaps that may come after some soul-searching among our people and after much debate has occurred. But I feel that day is not today, Mr. President. That's why I respectfully abstain. Thank you.
Who is next? I think Senator Escudero. Senator Escudero is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, yung tatay ko nag-file ng resolusyon sa Kamara, pinapirmahan niya sa kanyang mga kasamahan nung siya'y nabubuhay pa, para payagang ilibing si dating Pangulong Marcos sa libingan ng mga bayani. Senador na ako noon, pero hindi ako naghain ng kaparehong resolusyon sa Senado. Quite the contrary, Mr. President. At that time, I was one of those pursuing the passage of the law that Senator Angara mentioned a while ago. As your chairman of the Committee on Justice, I made sure that that law will be passed during my watch. After 20 long years, nagkapangulo na tayong Aquino, kung sino-sino pang pangulo, pero hindi napasa yung compensation bill. In fact, sa termino mismo ni Pangulo Aquino, natagalan pa ang pag-appoint ng ilan sa mga opisyal nun at nahirapan pa kaming ma-extend yun. Hindi issue dito kung pabor o kontra ang mga miyembro ng Senado kung papayagan ba siyang malibing o hindi. My abstention, Mr. President, is grounded on one reason and one reason only. Tama na. 30 years na nating pinagdedebatihan buhay at kamatayan ng dating Pangulong Marcos. 30 years na tayo nakakahati-hati bilang isang bansa sa pagitan ng dalawang apelyido, Aquino at Marcos. Tama naman na siguro, sapat na ang panahon na ginugol natin para sa away at bangayan na ito. Tama naman na siguro na bigyan natin ng konting pansin, mas mahabang pansin at panahon, yung mas nakararami nating kababayan na hindi po sikat ang apelido, na hindi po Marcos, hindi po Aquino ang apelido. Para po sa akin, yung mga binanggit na salita kanina ni Senator Gordon, sumasang-ayon ako doon. Huwag husgahan ng sino mang bumoto pabor, huwag husgahan ng sino mang bumoto kontra dito, o katulad ko, na gusto ng palawigin ang nasa kaisipan ng mas nakararami nating kababayan. Sa totoo lang, gusto nilang mabuhay ng marangal, tahimik at maunlad. At hindi na at ayaw pang pakialaman pa ang isu kaugnay ng mga Marcos o ng mga Aquino na politika lamang. Maraming nasaktan sa desisyon ng Korte Suprema. Marami ring natuwa sa desisyon ng Korte Suprema. Bilang abogado, Mr. President, tinuruan ako unang year ko pa lamang sa law. Sang-ayon ka man o hindi sa naging pasyaw desisyon ng Korte Suprema, marapat at dapat galangin at tanggapin mo yan. Dahil kapag ka hindi, ang kapalit, ang kabaliktaran, kawalan ng pagnanaig ng batas dito sa ating bansa ay mas mabigat na kabayaran para sa sino mang sa atin na nasaktan man o natuwa sa naging pasya ng Korte Suprema. Nabanggit ni Senator Angara tungkol sa referendum. Hindi ko alam kung sasangayon ako doon, Mr. President, dahil pagpapalawig pa yon sa issue pa rin. Dito na nga lang, nagkakahiwa-hiwalay na tayo. Dito na nga lang, nagdedebate tayo eh. Paparatingin pa ba natin muli sa sambayanan ang isyong ito? Gumawa ng politikal na pasya ang Pangulo, gumawa ng legal na desisyon ng Korte Suprema. Sangayon man tayo o hindi, ang dalawang sangay ng ating gobyerno ay nagpasya. Sangayon man tayo o hindi, marapat at dapat tanggapin at galangin natin ito upang sa gayon manaig ang hustisya at katarungan at batas dito sa ating bansa. May remedy pa naman pong available. Siguro sa mga protestang inilunsad, pabor man o kontra, maaaring i-consider ito ng Korte Suprema. At mas gusto ko sana, susugan ang prosesong yan. But one way or the other, whichever way this issue goes, I hope, once and for all, we can concentrate on the Filipino and not on one or two families only that have ruled this country for the past so many decades. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Recto, before Senator, then is Senator Recto giving way to Senator Lacson? Senator Lacson.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator
Thank you,
Lacson is recognized.
Majority Leader. I have a very brief explanation of my vote. I voted no out of respect to the Supreme Court ruling. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Senator Recto is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, ang Supreme Court nagpasya na
na legal ilibing si Marcos sa libingan ng mga bayani at sinabing walang grave abuse of discretion ayon sa ating Supreme Court. At sumasangayon ako sa rule of law, kaya nirespeto ko yung desisyon ng Supreme Court. But having said that, Mr. President, ako naniniwala din ako na hindi bayani ang dating Pangulo, ang Pangulong Marcos. Siguro kaya siya pwede ilibing doon ay dahil siya ay naging dating Pangulo, naging dating sundalo, pero para sa akin, hindi bayani ang dating Pangulo. Now, having said that, Mr. President, ako naniniwala din ako na ang pagiging isang bayani will be judged individually by every Filipino kung siya'y nasa puso nila bilang isang bayani at hindi kung saan siya nilibing. Having said that as well, Mr. President, sangayon ako sa sinabi ng ating kasamaan, si Senator Angara, na how do you resolve an issue na hindi legal kung hindi political? And the best way to resolve a political question is through an election. Kaya sang-ayon ako sa referendum. Maraming salamat, Ginoong Pangulo.
Senator Subiri is recognized. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, esteemed colleagues, we recognize that a lot of human rights violations were committed during martial law. There were thousands of disappearances who never came, disappearances or desaparecidos who never came home, and thousands of families who lost their loved ones. Businesses were taken down, monopolies were established, and capital was concentrated among a few. These are facts of our history that we must come to terms with. We respect all those whose lives were affected and whose rights were violated during this dark time in our history. However, in respect to the doctrine of separation of powers upon which a republic is founded, in the deference to the authority of the Supreme Court to decide this controversy, I believe that we should accord respect to the ruling of a co-equal branch of government. To be clear, the Supreme Court did not decide that Marcos should be buried in the libingan ng mga bayani. The issue that was brought before the court was whether or not it was within the executive's power to order such burial, and the Supreme Court merely upheld that our existing laws do not prohibit it. This does not give an imprimatur that the late dictator is a hero. I quote the court's decision that the proposed interment is not equivalent to the consecration of Marcos' mortal remains. The act itself does not confer him as the status of hero. I quote, Mr. President. Having weighed the abuses experienced by martial law victims on one hand, Mr. President, and the call for national conciliation and unity on the other, I humbly abstain from the proposed resolution because I believe only time will tell as to when we can all move on as a nation. History cannot be changed by just one act or decision. History is to be experienced, learned, and judged by the people. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Subiri. Well, Majority Leader, who else?
Yes, Mr. President, I know the Senate President has to leave, but my colleagues want the floor. So I saw them raising their hands. Aquino, Pangilinan, Gatchalian, Rosintiveros, Po.
So we can go ladies first, Majority Leader. Senator
It's up to you, Mr.
Senator
President.
Po is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I really would have rather that we didn't have to vote on this particular issue. But let me just say that while I respect the decision of the Supreme Court and we have to adhere to it, the Senate, being a co-equal branch, should be allowed also its own expression. And what we are doing, in fact, is stating our own personal beliefs in this matter. But I also agree with the proposal of Senator Angara that this is something that I feel that the public has to be able to weigh on. And I believe that the referendum is not a waste of time. If ever, it will encourage others also to think about the matter, and it should not be left alone to us, especially if this has been festering for the past more than 2 decades. This is also the same opinion as Senator Villanueva, who has expressed that He respects the decision of the Supreme Court, and this is just a manifestation of our own opinions here in the Senate. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator po. Senator Ontiveros is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. How apt that the resolution I filed was denominated as Senate Resolution number 86. 1986 po ang taon na ang sambayanan ay nagsalita sa isang malakas na tinig laban sa diktadura. It is this courage that we would have honored if we had decided to speak as a Senate on the decision to bury Marcos in the libingan ng mga bayani. Mr. President, the SC only said that the President can decide to bury the dictator in the LNMB. Nasa kamay pa po ni Presidente. He makes the final call. And as a co-equal body, we could have weighed in with our wisdom. I voted in favor of the motion. I voted in favor of truth, on the side of history, and on the side of our real heroes. Salamat po, Mr. President.
Senator Aquino is recognized.
Mr. President, not an explanation of my vote, but just a quick manifestation. Mr. President, earlier we had the gentleman from Sorsogon talk about the Libigan issue as if it is framed by just two families. And to be frank, Mr. President, nahihiya ako kapag sinasabi ang Libigan issue ay problema lang ng Aquino at ng Marcos. Nahihiya po ako sa libu-libong namatay, sa libu-libong nawala, sa libu-libong na torture. Nahihiya po ako sa pamilya ng ating Senate President, sa tatay ng ating Senate President. Nahihiya po ako sa PDP laban na binuo para labanan yung diktadurya. Nakakahiya po pag sinasabi nating isang pamilya lang o dalawang pamilya lang ang may kinalaman sa problemang ito. Mr. President, as I have said for some time, this is not just a problem or an issue of two families. This is a problem that has plagued thousands of families in our country. Families which have been destroyed, families which have been broken apart. Until today, yung mga epekto po niyan nandyan pa rin. Hindi lang po sa mga pamilya kung hindi sa ating kasaysayan. Kaya gusto ko po lang pong igiit muli ang issue po ng libing ni former President Marcos sa Libigan ng Bayani. Yan po ay hindi lang issue ng ilang pamilya, hindi lang po issue ng mga biktima ng martial law, kung hindi issue po ng ating bayan at ng ating kasaysayan. At tama lang po na may sabihin tayo tungkol sa isyong ito. Maraming salamat, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Aquino. Senator Gatchalian is recognized.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. Magandang hapon po. Madalas po kami nag-uusap po ng aking seatmate tungkol ho dito sa resolusyon na kanyang inihain. At talagang pinag-isipan ko mabuti itong sitwasyon na ito. Ako mismo, Mr. President, ay kinukondin ako po yung ginawa po ng dating Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos. At naniniwala po ako na hindi po makatarungan na ilibing ho siya, no, sa libingan ng mga bayani. Subalit Mr. President, ako rin po ay naniniwala po sa hustisya at sa katarungan po ng kataas-tahasang hukuman. Ilang beses po ako personal na umakyat sa Supreme Court at humingi po ng katarungan sa ilang pong kaso na hinarap ko po. At dahil sila po ay co-equal branch ng ating Senado at sila po ay nagkaroon na po ng desisyon, marapat din ho natin na bigyan ng galang, respetuhin yung kanilang desisyon at para po bigyan po ng recognition at ang kanilang desisyon at para po tayo ay magkaroon ng maayos na lipunan. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you. Senator Pangilinan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, bumoto tayo pabor sa resolusyon dahil simple lang naman po yung title ng resolution expressing the sense of the Senate that, well, in so many words, no, the former President Marcos is unfit to be buried in the libingan ng mga bayani. Sa akin po ay sumasang-ayon po ako ron. Kaya ho ako bumotong suporta rito. Doon sa usapin po nung nagdesisyon na po ang Supreme Court. Ang alam po natin, may motion for reconsideration. So pending pa rin po ito. At kahit na po maging final at executory po yung resolution na ito or yung decision dito, maaari pa rin pumosisyon ng ating Senado hindi sa hindi pagkilala, kung hindi pagsang-ayon. Iba ho yun. Iba ho yung hindi natin kinikilala ang desisyon ng Korte Suprema, iba naman po yung hindi tayo sumasang-ayon sa naging desisyon ng Korte Suprema. Maaari nating sabihin bilang isang Senado na bagamat kinikilala natin ang naging resolution o naging desisyon ng ating kataas-taas sang hukuman, hindi ho tayo sumasang-ayon. At hindi tayo sumasang-ayon dahil sa ilang mga dahilan. Unang-una, hindi ko ho maipapaliwanag sa aking mga anak. Kung tinanong sa akin, bakit kayo pumapayag na ipalibing ang isang hindi bayani sa libingan ng mga bayani? Simple lang po sa akin. Kaya po, tayo po ay pumabor sa nasabing resolusyon. Sa usapin po nung pending pa nga at hindi pa ho pinal, sa maraming pagkakataon, naulit na po natin ito nung isang araw, uulitin lang po natin, sa maraming pagkakataon, ang ating Senado ay nagkaroon ng sense of the Senate resolution kahit na ho, pending pa ho, ang isang bagay o isang kaso sa Korte Suprema. Ang isang halimbawa, at nabanggit ko po ito, nung dinedebate ng Korte Suprema yung usapin ng Constituent Assembly, kung dapat bang voting separately o voting jointly. Habang dinedebate po yan o pinag-uusapan sa Korte Suprema, naglabas ng resolusyon ang Senado. 23 pa nga na senador ang pumirma sa nasabing resolusyon na dapat voting separately. Sa usapin po ng Declaration of State of Emergency, nung panahon po ni dating Pangulong Arroyo, na kung saan inaresto si Randy David at nagkaroon pa ng raid sa Daily Tribune. Nagkaroon din ng investigasyon ang Senado habang nililitis o habang nakapending ang kaso at kine-question yung state of emergency sa Korte Suprema. Naglabas pa ng 2 resolution report ang Senado na sinasabing illegal yung state of emergency at sinasabing illegal yung pag-raid sa Daily Tribune at illegal yung pag-aresto kay Randy David. Senate resolution po yan, Senate committee report yan, habang pending pa yung kaso sa Supreme Court. So maraming pagkakataon, pumuposisyon po ang Senado. Hindi dahil hindi natin kinikilala ang Korte Suprema, kung hindi nagkakaroon din po tayo ng sarili po nating pasya at sarili po nating paninindigan bilang Senado. Sa huling banda, Mr. President, it has been said that the beginning of the end of war is in remembering. And I believe the same goes for tyranny, oppression, and the violence and brutality of dictatorial rule. We must remember. We must not forget. And this resolution precisely is our way of not forgetting despite the ruling of the Supreme Court. Maraming salamat.
Thank you, Senator Ping. Senator Drilon, it's recognized.
Just a very brief point, Mr. President. The Supreme Court technically said we are dismissing the petition because we do not find that the President abused his discretion when he allowed the burial of the late President in the Libigan ng mga bayani. The Supreme Court said this is a political decision. Political question. I'm sorry, that this is a political question. And they reviewed the decision of a political leader and said he did not abuse his discretion and therefore we dismiss the petition. Mr. President, the Senate is a political body and therefore has every prerogative to express its views, especially on a political issue such as what we voted upon. There is nothing wrong with going against the decision of the Supreme Court, especially under these circumstances. We maintain our respect of the Supreme Court as being officers of the law, but we can do so without being disrespectful. And by voting on this resolution, the sense of the Senate is no disrespect for the Supreme Court. It is, and each of us exercised his or her judgment on this political issue, and we placed ourselves on the record where we stand. Therefore, let history judge us after today. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Drilon. Majority Leader?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we suspend the session until 9 o'clock in the morning of Tuesday, November 15, 2016.
Is there any objection? There being none, the session is suspended until 9 o'clock in the morning of Tuesday, November 15, 2016. The 38th session of the Senate, in the first regular session of the 17th Congress, is hereby called to order. Let us rise for the opening prayer. Heavenly Father, we open by praising you, for you are our Creator and our Provider. We owe everything to you. We also give you thanks. Thank you for the blessings, the gifts, and for taking good care of us. Thank you too for returning our brother, Senator Manny Pacquiao, to us safe and sound and successful and victorious. We would like to pray for the safety as well as the success of our other colleagues who cannot be with us today as they pursue their business abroad, especially Senator Frank Drilon, who is about to receive a very prestigious award from the government of Japan. Dear God, we believe that you have great plans for the Philippines. We humbly ask your guidance in everything we have to do for the good of our nation. We continue to pray for unity and peace in our country. May the discord between our brothers and sisters be healed by your divine grace and intervention, so our nation can finally be united for the good of our country and for the success of our government. May you use each one of us here in the Senate to bring glory to your name. Please continue to give us the wisdom and courage to practice prudence, temperance, justice, and fortitude in our daily lives. And may you continually shower us with your heavenly graces of faith, hope, and charity to guide us in our lives. In closing, allow us to quote Galatians 6:9. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. This we pray in your holy name. Amen. Secretary, please call the roll.
Roll call of Senator members. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, De Lima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Hunasan, Hontiveros, Lacson, Ligada, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Po, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Zuberi. Senate President Pimentel.
With 13 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 37th session Monday, November 7, and consider the same as approved.
There is a motion to dispense with the reading of the journal of Monday, November 7, 2016, and consider the same as approved. Any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, we'd like to acknowledge some guests in the Senate, Vice Mayor and barangay officials of District 1 of Nagcarlan, Laguna, headed by Vice Mayor Amelia Hernandez and Councilor Arevalo, Mr. President.
Welcome to the local government officials of Nagcarlan, Laguna, and to all of our guests.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Chamber, I move that before we consider the reference of business, I move to consider consider PS Resolution 217, taking into consideration PS Resolution 219, 220, 225, 227, and 228.
There is a motion for us to consider before the reference of business Senate Resolution number 217, together with the related resolutions 219, 220, 227, 228. Any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
May we ask Secretary to read only the title of the measure without prejudice to inserting into the records the entire text of the resolution.
Secretary.
Resolution commending and congratulating Senator Emmanuel Manny Pacman Pacquiao for defeating G.C. Vargas in his comeback boxing match held in Las Vegas, Nevada, and being declared as the new WBO welterweight champion, sponsored by Senator Vicente Soto III.
Mr. President, instead of sponsoring, I understand that Senator Mick Zubiri will also be co-sponsoring it. Let me just state for the record that the resolution is self-explanatory, and to consider also, aside from the resolution I filed, to consider 219, 220, 225, 227, and 228, subject to style. There is one whereas that I would want to include, which is not present in most of the resolutions. And this reads, Mr. President, whereas Senator Manny Pacquiao deserves to be commended because, notwithstanding the fact that he has been diligently working as a member of the Philippine Senate, he was able to successfully juggle with it his boxing career, make a return in the ring, and regain the WBO welterweight title. Mr. President, at the proper time, perhaps we may include that whereas. But at this point, may we ask Senator Zubiri to co-sponsor the resolution, Mr. President.
Senator Zubiri is recognized to co-sponsor Senate Resolution number 217.
Maraming salamat, Mr. President, Majority Floor Leader. Isang malaking karangalan para sa akin ang bigyang pugay ngayong hapon na ito ang isang kaibigan at kapwa mambabatas at kapwa taga Mindanao na si Senator Manny Pacquiao. I am particularly proud of the fact that this honorable senator and honorable champion was actually born in Barangay Magsaysay, Kibawe, Bukidnon. Mr. President, it was in his short years in Bukidnon, probably eating our beef there, before he moved to General Santos and grew up in General Santos. It's been 21 years now that Senator Pacquiao has been engaged in the world of professional boxing. Barely 5 feet tall and weighing in 106 pounds, when the young Manny Pacquiao set for a career in 1995 that would change his life forever. Now, more than 2 decades after, the light flyweight from Gensan and Bukidnon is known as one of the greatest athletes the world has ever known. Maraming pumuna sa muling pagbalik ng ating pambansang kamao sa boxing ring sa kabila ng pagkakahalal nito bilang isang senador ng Republika ng Pilipinas. He juggled his training with his duties as legislator of this august chamber. At meron po nagsasabi, at minsan ay iniinsulto pa ang ating pambansang kamao at sinasabing, paano naman siya magte-training and senador siya? Baka hindi siya pumapasok. At gusto ko pong sabihin sa ating mga kababayan na hindi po nag-absent ni minsan ang ating pambansang kamao in these last few months while training for his fight with Mr. Vargas. In fact, he's very active in attending committee hearings and in participating in deliberations and discussions on the floor. You know, the difficulty there, Mr. President, is in the Senate, there are a lot of mental challenges. Mental challenges can also be taxing to one's body. Kaya ako'y saludo sa kanya dahil coming out of the Senate, fighting all these mental challenges, he still has the time and the effort of training hard to win championship fights. Manny Pacquiao, no doubt, is one of the greatest boxers in the world, and history would remember him as the first and only boxer to be hailed an 8-division world champion and the first boxer to win in the lineal championship in 5 different weight classes. But history does not stop him from being an octuple world champion. He made a habit of making history, and this time Manny has set his mark as the first sitting senator to win a boxing title. The first sitting senator. This he triumphantly accomplished after his match last Sunday against Jesse Vargas. Kaya mga kapatid, saludong-saludo po ako sa kanya, the Filipino boxing icon, Senator Manny Pacquiao's exemplary performance in a resounding roar of his return in the ring. And I filed this resolution number 225, to congratulate and commend Senator Manny Pacquiao for winning his match against Jesse Vargas. I now stand before you to honor him for his invaluable contribution to Philippine sports and consistently bringing pride to our country. He is not just a pride of the Senate, he is our national pride and inspiration to many. Mabuhay ka, Senator Manny Pacquiao.
Thank you, Senator Subiri. Majority Leader. Mr. President, may we open the period of amendments, Mr. President?
An objection? Period of amendment for Senate Resolution number 217 is hereby in order.
Mr. President, before the resolutory portion, insert a whereas, which states, whereas Senator Manny Pacquiao deserves to be commended because notwithstanding the fact that he has been diligently working as a member of the Philippine Senate, he was able to successfully juggle with it his boxing career, make a return in the ring, and regain the WBO welterweight title, semicolon, Mr. President. So move.
There is a proposed amendment. Any objection? As read by the Majority Leader. There being none, the amendment is approved.
Mr. President, I move to adopt PS Resolution 217, taking into consideration PS Resolution 219, 220, 225, 227, and 228, and that all members of the Senate present be made co-authors of the measure.
The period of amendment is terminated, and there is now a motion to approve Senate Resolution number 217, taking into consideration proposed Senate Resolutions number 219, 220, 225, 227, 228, and making all senators present as co-authors thereof. Any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. May we recognize Senator Manny Pacquiao?
Senator Manny Pacquiao is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to manifest my thanksgiving for the overflowing love and support that you have expressed. It is with great honor that I am the subject of Senate Resolution 217, authored by the Majority Floor Leader, Senator Vicente C. Soto III, and co-sponsored by Senator Mig Subere. I deeply appreciate the resolution commending and congratulating me for defeating Jesse Vargas. My comeback boxing match, where I was declared as the new WBO welterweight champion, is dedicated to all boxing fans and to all of you who believe in me.
Nag-uumapaw ang aking pasasalamat sa suporta ninyo at sa sambayanang Pilipino noong hinarap ko si JC Vargas. Buong puso kong inaalay ang aking tagumpay sa inyo at sa ating mahal na Pilipinas. Bakas pa ang mga pasa sa aking mukha, subalit hindi ko ito alintana. Mapasaya lamang at makatulong sa ating mga kababayan at makapagbigay ng karangalan sa ating bayan. Mr. President, patuloy po akong nagpapasalamat sa Poong May Kapal dahil sa kanyang pagpapala at paggabay. Nararapat lamang na siya ay sambahin, purihin at pasalamatan. Boxing is my passion. I come fully alive wherever I am in the ring, but I have a greater passion serving our country. Just like you, Mr. President, my heartbeat is for our fellow men. My fight with JC Vargas is a story ended, but the tougher battles outside the boxing ring are yet to be won. There are bigger problems that we need to confront. There are more complicated issues that we need to clarify. Mr. President, as partners for change, we are solution providers. We shall continue to investigate, debate, and legislate. We shall keep fighting for what is right. As nation builders, we shall keep moving forward. Together we will declare that greater things are yet to come and yet to be done for our nation. To manifest my heartfelt thanksgiving, Mr. President, I would like to donate my WBA welterweight belt to the Senate of the Philippines. The honor does not belong to me alone, but to every Filipino. May it serve as an inspiration for everyone to pursue excellence and continue fighting for our nation's sovereignty. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Pacquiao.
We have a 1-minute suspension, Mr. President, to congratulate the gentleman from General Santos from Mindanao.
Session is suspended.
Ilagay na sa museum mo.
Ay, nakakagasgas ba? Nakakagasgas yata. Gasgasan yata. So, ikaw muna, Secretary, si Gob. Sa Senate property na ito, so, dito yata sa carpet. Ayun, may case pala yan. Kasi kailangan sa ibang belts nila. Sa dami pa ng belts ni Mami. Sige ko na muna, sir. Turnover na sa'yo. Mix. Malakas ka ng pabalato ka naman may balato. Yung kayo na, si Rolando Navarrete daw, binenta daw yung kanya by 25,000 pesos. Pero yun, mas mahal. Mahal yan, kasi sa bigat na lang. Kinekwek lang. Mayor B. Kala ko si De La Rosa nag-wave. Pinaheadbutt ka lang eh. Dito, Sen. 144. Ayun. We're all cheering. Then they smack here again. It's like nothing happened. Unbelievable. Sunny, hindi ka pa na? I thought we were there. Pakita mo siya. Dito siya. Session is resumed. Majority Leader.
Adjourn muna ito. Thank you, Mr. President. I was just adjourning the meeting beside me. Okay, suspended. The meeting is suspended, Mr. President, over here. With the permission of the chamber, before we proceed with the reference of business, I move that we recognize Senator Risa Hontiveros to speak on a matter of public interest.
Is there any objection? There being none, Senator Hontiveros is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise on a matter of personal and collective privilege. I rise on behalf of Susan Kimpo, a prepubescent girl during the early years of martial law, who spent her weekends packing cooked rice for detainees at detention centers holding political prisoners. 5 of her siblings were imprisoned during martial law, all of them student activists belonging to the underground movement. Her brother Nathan was stripped naked and clubbed several times by his captors. Her brother Jan, and I quote from her book, Subversive Lives, had his head repeatedly immersed in a commode filled with urine. Water was injected into his testicles, and his feet were doused, then jabbed with live wire. Jan Kimpo, encircled in this photo, joined the ranks of the desaparecidos. And the last conversation Susan had with him was when he asked her to leave him some dinner. Another brother, June, was shot in Nueva Ecija in 1981. I rise on behalf of Sixto Carlos, now a jolly man in his 70s, with ruddy cheeks and an easy laugh. He was arrested with no charges filed in 1978 and put under solitary confinement for 2 years. He was viciously beaten, had boiling water poured at him, and was hung from the ceiling by his handcuffed hands. In his own words, he said, "I was held on either arm by 2 men, and the 3rd man sat on my lap. The blindfold was removed and replaced by a towel on my face. They commenced to put water over the towel on my face. I had the sensation of drowning." Mr. President, this is what was known as waterboarding, an innocuous name for a torture technique so repulsive and dehumanizing. I rise on behalf of Eta Rosales, former Congresswoman and former chairperson of the Commission on Human Rights, who was repeatedly raped and tortured during martial law. She recounts her torture under the hands of her prison guards. "They tried to make me speak by burning me, pouring what felt like hot wax from a burning candle on my arms and legs. When that didn't work, they tore off my clothes, pressed the barrel of a gun against my temple, and played Russian roulette." When she was elected Congresswoman of Akbayan in 1998, Mr. President, she met one of her captors who had now become her colleague. "The last time I met you," Eta said with her trademark candor, "was in the military safe house where I was tortured." I rise for them, Mr. President, and I rise for all the victims of martial law. Ako po'y tumatayo sa harap ninyo ngayon, alang-alang sa mga na-torture, mga pinatay, mga kinulong ng rehimeng Marcos. Ako'y tumatayo alang-alang sa kanilang mga mahal sa buhay, mga magulang, asawa, at anak na inulila ng diktadura. Para po sa kanila ang resolusyon na ihahain ko sa Senado ngayong hapon. I rise to tell them during this winter of anxiety and uncertainty that there are many of us who still remember. I want to tell them that there are mothers like myself who tell their outspoken millennials that their freedoms in social media did not come for free, and that their counterparts in the 1970s were being thrown in prison for speaking their mind. Gusto kong ikwento sa kanila yung mga guro sa mga paaralan kung saan ako nag-donate ng librong Never Again ni Raisa Robles na nagsasabing sa sarili nilang kusa at pagpupunyagi, binabahagi nila ang kahindik-hindik ng mga pangyayari sa panahon ng diktadura sa kanilang mga estudyante. I want to tell them about the many young people I have met, so far removed from the stereotype of the uncaring, self-absorbed millennial, who ask me what they can do to fight the forces of historical revisionism that are at work, and who assure me that the struggle to preserve our collective memory is a struggle their generation shares with ours. Hindi ko po panghihimasukan ang pasya ng Korte Suprema hinggil sa paglibing ng dating diktador sa libingan ng mga bayani. We cannot second-guess its wisdom, even as we cannot imagine how it must be for Sixto Carlos, Eta Rosales, and the Quimpo family, who will live with the reality that the architect of their torture and the torture and death of their kin has now been designated a hero. Habang tinuturo natin sa ating mga kabataan ang karahasan ng martial law dahil yun ang nakalagay sa Republic Act No. 10368, ililibing naman daw natin sa libingan ng mga bayani ang siyang naghasik ng karahasan na ito. Habang tayo'y nagbabayad ng danyos sa mga biktima ng martial law at sa kanilang mga pamilya, ililibing natin daw sa libingan ng mga bayani ang dahilan ng pagbayad ng danyos. But we also know that the decision to give the late dictator a hero's burial lies ultimately in the hands of President Rodrigo Duterte. I call on the President to respond to the challenge of history and reject with finality all plans to give Marcos a hero's burial. The libingan ng mga bayani is the designated place for Filipino soldiers, war veterans, and citizens whose contributions to the nation render them fit to be called heroes. Given the long history of the Filipino people with tyranny and oppression, the libingan has been created to honor the memory of our brave countrymen and women who fought for freedom and liberty even in the face of superior force, so that the present generation may remember and emulate their legacy. It should be the final resting place of heroes, a symbolism that is not lost on the Marcos family, who has been lobbying feverishly for his burial, and, if our president is correct, even funded his campaign to secure this concession. Mr. President, in Germany, Adolf Hitler's initial grave is now a car park in Berlin. Idi Amin, the Ugandan dictator notorious for maintaining torture chambers in Kampala, is not even buried in his own country. In Serbia, Slobodan Milosevic's party pushed heavily for his burial in the Alley of the Greats, but was rebuffed. He is now buried in his hometown. In Haiti, Francois Papadoc Duvalier, who brought Haiti to economic ruin, used voodoo legends to control his people, and executed his political opponents, was denied a state funeral after his death. His grave in Port-au-Prince is now in shambles. Pol Pot, known as the Butcher of Cambodia, was unceremoniously burned in a pile of rubbish. His cremation site in An Long Veng is now a tourist destination, and many Cambodians travel to the site to spit on it. Muammar Gaddafi's body, after being displayed for 5 days by the new leaders of Libya, was laid to rest in a simple, unmarked grave. Ganito po tinatrato ang mga diktador sa ibang bansa, Mr. President. Ang kanilang puntod ay hindi puntod ng parangal. Kung ito man ay bibigyan ng pansin, ito'y para magturo ng leksyon sa mga susunod na henerasyon. Ito'y para sabihin, huwag tularan. Habang dito sa Pilipinas, ang mga diktador ay tinuturing bang bayani at binibigyan ng parangal, at ang biktima ng diktador ay pinagdududahan at isinasa isang tabi? But, Mr. President, it is not only for the victims of martial law that I rise, for the generation of our parents, and for our generation who has lived with the enduring wounds of martial law. I also rise for our younger generations, those who will only get to listen to the stories of our wounds, and who we hope will see in those stories our deepest truths. I rise for our millennials, who will probably never meet Susan and her siblings, or June Carlos, or Eta Rosales, but who we hope will realize that the heroes of martial law, many of them were young persons like themselves. Ang nagpabagsak sa diktadura ay katulad lang din nila. Katulad din ng aking mga anak, masayahin, palabarkada, palatawa, may pangarap sa buhay. Ngunit tumalima noong hinamon ng kasaysayan. Mr. President, nagpasya na ang Korte Suprema, but no tombstone, no grandiose cemetery can change the fact that Ferdinand Marcos was not a hero. He was a plunderer, torturer, and a thief, with a family now seeking to rewrite history to serve their interests. He co-opted institutions, in the past this Senate included, in order to consolidate all power to himself. It is our duty as senators, Mr. President, as Filipinos, as students of history, to stand against this travesty and say, as has been said before, never again. Only then can we look back to the past with pride and to the future with hope. Let us not fail the test of history. Mr. President, as I have previously discussed with the Majority Floor Leader and with the permission of the body, I would like to have this privileged speech considered as sponsorship speech for Senate Resolution number 86 and kindly request the Majority Floor Leader to subject it to a vote. Marami pong salamat, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Antiveros. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, may I move for a suspension?
Session is suspended.
Thank you.